Sorry, clerk, are you still there?
Yes, I am. I'm just confirming that everything is working before we...
Okay, got it. No worries.
My apologies.
No.
Just confirming that. Okay, I believe we are live.
Thank you. This meeting of the Community Affairs and Planning Committee is being held electronically and live streamed on the town's website. All members of council in attendance are participating by audio and video teleconference, and town staff are available throughout the meeting if council members have any questions on the agenda. For members of the public watching at home, please bear with us if we encounter any technical difficulties throughout the meeting. I will now call this meeting to order. We will start with the land acknowledgement. We would like to begin this meeting by acknowledging that the land on which we gather is situated within the traditional treaty territory of the Mississaugas, more specifically the Mississaugas of Scugog Island First Nation, signatories of the Gunshot Treaty of 1788 and the Williams Treaty of 1923. This land is and will continue to be home to the Indigenous peoples. Let us acknowledge the mistakes and traumas of the past through authenticity and support truth and reconciliation. Let us engage and celebrate Indigenous communities by being leaders of action in acknowledging the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples and the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's recommendations towards truth and reconciliation. Let us keep these principles close as we continue towards truth and reconciliation and as we move forward with kindness and respect as a community. I will now ask the committee if there's any disclosures of pecuniary interest. Councillor Dice?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I do have a declaration of conflict of interest on item 4.2, which is the old Henderson property at 290 Old Harwood. I have family that reside there.
Thank you. The clerk will note that. I now have the adoption of the minutes moved by Regional Councillor Dice, seconded by Councillor Bauer, that the minutes of the Community Affairs and Planning Committee meeting on June 6, 2022 be approved. Are there any questions or comments on the minutes? Then we'll call to vote. All in favor? Opposed? And that carries. We're now section number 4, which is the public meetings. We'll start with item 4.1, which is PDS 2022-20 Parkland Dedication Bylaw Update. I'll introduce Supervisor Planning Policy and Research Sean McCullough to present. Or unless it's Director Romanowski.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It is myself going to be presenting this evening. Just going to bring up my presentation. Sorry, Jason, would you mind if I shared the presentation this evening?
You've been made a co-host and you should be able to share.
Great, thank you very much. All right, good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Thank you for the introduction. My name is Sean McCullough. I'm the Supervisor of Planning Policy and Research here at the town of Ajax. And tonight, I am here to discuss the town's new parkland dedication bylaw. With me, I also have Andrew Grunda from Watson Associates, who has been the town's consultant and who will hopefully help answer any questions that you may have this evening. So first, I just wanted to provide an overview of what parkland dedication bylaw is. So the Planning Act allows the town to require as a condition of development or redevelopment the conveyance of land or cash in lieu for parks and other recreational purposes. Throughout the presentation today, I will refer to 2 ways that the town can accept parkland dedication. The first is the physical conveyance of land, where the town would accept land from a developer and then construct a new park. Historically, this has been the predominant form of dedication that the town has accepted. The second is cash in lieu of parkland, where the town accepts payment of the equivalent market value of land that would otherwise be conveyed. The town can use these funds to purchase parkland where needed and construct and enhance parks. It is expected that this will be the predominant method moving forward.
I'm going to pause you right there. I think we're in presenter mode right now.
Sorry. Thank you.
Yeah. If you like, the clerk can put it back up and then you can just tell them next slide if that makes it
It
easier.
should work now. Does that work now?
Let's see. Yep. We just have the slides.
I apologize for that, everyone.
Nope. All good. Thank you.
All right, so the Act establishes two rates. The first is the base requirement, which allows the town to require parkland dedication at a rate of 2% for industrial and commercial purposes, or 5% for all other purposes. And this is typically applied to low density residential. Next is the alternative requirement, which allows the town to require parkland dedication at a maximum rate of 1 hectare per 300 dwelling units, where land is conveyed, or 1 hectare per 500 dwelling units, where cash in lieu is paid. This is typically applied to medium and high density development. The town's current bylaw, which is bylaw number 79/2006, was passed in June of 2006. So over the years, challenges have been identified, such as outdated land values, which are shown here, deduction of development charges from the market value, which typically doesn't happen, the application of the 2% base rate to certain uses, and other terminology challenges that should be updated. Next, as many of you may remember, through Bill 108, the More Homes, More Choice Act, the province started exploring alternative ways for municipalities to collect funds for development-related infrastructure and parks. After significant pushback, the province released Bill 197, the COVID-19 Economic Recovery Act, which maintained the current base and alternative parkland dedication rates. However, the legislation identified the current bylaws that include the alternative rate would expire on September 18th, 2022. It also created new legislative processes for passing of a parkland dedication bylaw and also allows them to be appealed to the Ontario Land Tribunal. As a result, parkland dedication bylaws are being watched closely by the development community to ensure the proposed rates are justified. The town's official plan establishes park standards and locations and also authorizes the use of the alternative parkland dedication requirement for medium and high density development only. The official plan also includes policies that identify that the town will consider credit where development provides privately owned public space, subject to specific requirements in downtown Ajax, and consider reduced parkland dedication in community improvement plan areas. The Planning Act requires municipalities to pass a parks plan prior to passing a parkland dedication bylaw. In June of this year, the town passed the 10-year Recreation Parks Master Plan and established a level of service of 1.8 hectares of active parkland per 1,000 residents.
Mr. McCullough, I'm so sorry. I'm going to get you to pause right there. To the clerk, the live feed on YouTube isn't showing the slides. So I've just been made aware by Councillor Taylor Moran from residents, and when I go to YouTube myself, it doesn't actually show up. Is there a way we can fix that?
Give me one moment.
Yes, this is Robert Martin as well. Is this not supposed to be the one for the community of the being built at 290 Old Harwood?
Yeah, so that's later on the agenda. So right now we're just dealing with 4.1 on the agenda, which is the Parks and Mass, which is the parkland utilization. That's the next part of the agenda, sir.
Thank you.
Sure. But back to the clerk. I just want to make sure that's cleared in case people are watching at home and not on the meeting.
Yeah, Mr. Clerk, let me know if you'd like me to try to reshare again.
Sorry, my apologies. I'm working on it.
Why don't we actually just call for a quick 5-minute recess then? We'll let the staff kind of resettle and we'll restart from there. Is council okay with that? Okay, then I'll just quickly call for a quick 5-minute recess. We'll get all the delegates out and we'll reset this. Thank you.
Mr. Martin, just while we're troubleshooting here. Oh, I was just going to ask you to turn off your camera, but you have, so thank you very much.
Okay, it appears, fingers crossed, that everything is working again.
So Mr. Martin, just while we're troubleshooting here. Oh, I was just going to ask you to turn off your camera, but you have, so thank you very much.
Deja vu. Okay, we'll just wait for all members of council to jump back on. I did say 5 minutes, so people might have jumped off. 4.
Okay, Councillor Lee, I believe we have everything sorted out.
Thank you. I'm just waiting for Councillor Khan to jump back on. But you know what? I think we can just go ahead and start. Thank you everyone for your patience. We did say at the top of the meeting that we could encounter some technical difficulties, so hopefully that's all ironed out. And Mr. McCullough, thank you for your patience, and please proceed.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. So as I was mentioning, in June of this year, the town passed the 10-year Recreation Parks Master Plan and established a level of service of 1.8 hectares of active parkland per 1,000 residents. This is important as it sets the basis for the work that was completed by our consultant. This plan also identified that parkland will be required in intensification areas and will be considered through the future review of the official plan. So next up, I will discuss the work that was completed by our consultant in the background reports. The approach taken by Watson first examined the anticipated development, and from that considered how much dedication could be collected using the Planning Act and the current bylaw rates to determine how much supply could theoretically be collected if we took a business as usual approach. The background report then considers the standards established in the Recreation Parks Master Plan, as well as the official plan, to determine the potential value of land that could be conveyed to the town, as well as future capital projects. I think what's most important to understand here is that the potential supply needs to be balanced with your projected demand in order to justify the proposed requirements that would be outlined in our new parkland dedication bylaw, and that leads us to the assessment of the parkland dedication bylaw. So Watson's examined the growth forecast to 2031 and has used the DC forecast for residential growth aligned with our parks plan. as well as work completed for the MCR for the non-residential growth. So here you can see that if the town were to utilize the base requirement or the maximum alternative requirement in the Planning Act, the town could expect to collect between 3.9 hectares and 15.4 hectares of land. However, the town's official plan only authorizes use of the alternative requirement for medium and high density development. So using the official plan requirement, the town could expect to collect around 15.1 hectares if land were conveyed. However, most development in the town will be through medium and high density development, and therefore using the cash in lieu, the town could expect around 10.1 hectares with an estimated value of $66 million. Now, that was the potential supply side, and next we need to look at what our demand is. So to determine demand, we look at what the land that the town is projected to collect over the forecast period through various development applications, and parks-related capital projects that could be funded through the reserve fund, which are not funded by DCs. So we've examined our capital forecast as well as projects that were identified in the Parks and Recreation Master Plan. So what we found was that the value of land the town could expect to collect over the forecast period is around $56.7 million, and approximately $5.3 million in planned capital projects were identified. At the end of 2021, the town had approximately $4.1 million in reserves that need to be deducted from this demand. This totals approximately $58.8 million in parkland demand over the forecast period. When we compare the maximum parkland conveyance from the OP policies of 15.1 hectares against the demand from the Recreation and Parks Master Plan of 9.6 hectares, this leads us to a surplus of 5.5 hectares. Similarly, if we compare the maximum cash in lieu value of $66.5 million against the projected value of $58.8 million, we have a surplus of $7.7 million. Now, normally I would say a surplus is good, but as I mentioned earlier, our supply needs to align with the demand in order to justify the requirements set out in our bylaw. So as a result, the consultant has recommended imposing reduced maximums for medium and high density development, align the policies of the official plan, and align the rates so that they're more equitable on a per capita basis. So here we have the recommended rates. We have 5% for low density residential, and this aligns with our official plan. For medium density residential, we're proposing 1 hectare per 500 dwelling units for both land conveyance and cash in lieu. For high density residential, we're proposing 1 hectare per 550 dwelling units where there's conveyance, or 1 hectare per 615 dwelling units where cash in lieu is acquired. Commercial and industrial would maintain that base requirement at 2%, and all other uses, with some exemptions, would be applied the 5% at the base requirement. So these results lead us to a balanced supply and demand. So here we've got the land conveyance assessment. You can see where that starts to balance out. And similarly, we have the cash in lieu assessment where again, the values supply starts to meet the demand as projected by our consultant. So other recommended amendments from the consultant include expanding the use of the reserve fund for other recreational purposes, such as parkland enhancement, capital projects, and equipment, removing the development charge deduction from the value calculation, align the bylaw with the town's official plan policies to consider credit for privately owned public space, and consideration of reduced dedication in community improvement plan areas. Now, for clarification, these last two are only enabling policies and would be guided by a separate guideline or a CIP itself. After reviewing the municipal comparison that was completed by Watson, staff are also recommending introducing new exemptions, including municipal and government buildings, hospitals, cemeteries, agricultural buildings, excluding greenhouses, temporary uses, and accessory dwelling units. A formula for calculating requirements for mixed-use buildings has also been added to the draft bylaw. Details and requirements for completing a land appraisal to determine the market value, ensuring that the bylaw remains current for each development, and minor technical amendments such as definitions being added. We held 2 consultation meetings. The first was targeted towards the development industry and other agency stakeholders. This took place on August 22nd of this year. Questions related to applying credits for privately owned public spaces in major transit station areas, the process for appraisals, and level of service questions were identified. A public open house was also held on August 23rd and one question just relating to the approximate per unit cost was requested. I also note that 2 letters were received today, one from Build and one from a local developer that have been provided to you for review. Staff are in the process of discussing a couple of the items identified in the letter with our legal team, as well as our consultant. So as a result, staff are recommending just a minor amendment to the recommendation. That is that the draft Town of Ajax Parkland dedication bylaw, included in attachment 2 of this report, be forwarded to a future council meeting for approval, and that staff be authorized to make minor technical, legal, or administrative amendments or other amendments recommended in response to correspondence received, if needed, prior to its consideration. Also, I just want to highlight for next steps that any interested party who wishes to be notified of the passing of this bylaw can do so by sending an email to myself, and my contact information is here. It's also on the IMO page, which is referenced at the beginning and the end of this slideshow. So thank you for taking the time to allow me to present to you this evening. As I mentioned, we have Andrew Grunda on the call who will be able to assist me. I may have oversimplified some of his great work that he's completed so far. So hopefully he can help us with any technical questions that you might have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McCullough. Does any members of committee have any questions on the presentation? We'll start with Mayor Collier, followed by Councillor Bauer. Go ahead, Mayor Collier.
Thank you, Chair. Through you to Mr. McCullough. And I don't have my notes right in front of me. I'll have to find it. But one of the things that stood out to me was we are permitted to ask for a higher number of units in our revised bylaw, yet we are coming in at a lower level. And I'm just wondering why. It says something in there about being defendable.
Through the chair to Mayor Collier, thank you. That's a great question. So through Bill 197, there were amendments to the Planning Act that now enable parkland dedication bylaws to be appealed to the Ontario Land Tribunal. So that is something that is new. And that stems from, there's been a number of legal cases that have taken place in other municipalities where these types of bylaws have been appealed, or before that they were being taken to this Superior Court. So that was the rationale for the being appealed. Now, as we worked through our consultant, we used their expertise in some of the challenges that they've seen, some of the items that are being contested against these bylaws. And that's where we've worked through this analysis, looking at what our supply and our demand is, and being able to justify what those rates are. So based on the amount of land that we currently have in our official plan and development applications that we think we will get over the forecast period, plus our capital projects that are eligible to be funded for this, if we were to go to the maximum, we would be collecting, for lack of a better way of explaining it, too much. So that's why we're seeing some reduced rates in the bylaw to balance that out, because that's what we feel we can justify and defend.
Okay. Thank you. And when it talks about 1 hectare per 500 dwelling units, for instance, for medium, if it's only going to be 300, that would be prorated to 0.6. Is that how it works?
Through the chair, Mayor Collier, that's correct.
Okay. Okay. Now, where is this thing? I know I have more questions, but I'm just having trouble finding them. Sorry, Chair. Just give me one moment, please.
You can also save them for when the report's called up too. This is just the presentation for now and the open house.
Okay. I will, because I don't have them right here. I'll come back to them. Thank you.
No problem. Thank you. Councillor Bauer.
Thank you, Chair. And Mayor Collier asked my question, so none for me. Thank you.
Thank you. Would any of the members of the committee like to ask any questions? Seeing none, Mr. McCullough, just very quickly, you said example of an agricultural building outside of a greenhouse. Can you give a practical example of what that would look like?
To you, Mr. Chair, it would be like an agricultural building, like a barn would be exempt from the bylaw, and then but a greenhouse would still have to pay.
Okay, great. So any other questions on the presentation? Seeing none, I'm now going to open this meeting to the public and invite comments and questions. Again, we're on the Parkland Dedication Bylaw update. We will get to the other pieces after. So I'll now ask the clerk if anybody wishes to virtually address the committee. Mr. Clerk?
Chair, we do not have any delegates to speak to item 4.1.
Great. And then I believe you said the consultant was on the line. Did the consultant want to come forward and say any words regarding the report?
Hi, thank you. I'm Andrew Grunda from Watson & Associates. I have no comments further to Mr. McCullough's presentation. I think he did an excellent job summarizing our report and our work.
Thank you. Any questions for the consultant from committee? In that case, I have a resolution moved by Mayor Collier, seconded by Councillor Rob Tyler Moran, that the report entitled Parkland Dedication Bylaw Update and Associated Attachments be received for information, and that the draft, this is the updated one, right? Yes, that the draft Town of Ajax Parkland Dedication Bylaw included as attachment 2 with this report be forwarded to a future council meeting for approval, and that staff be authorized to make minor technical, legal, or administrative amendments or other amendments recommended in response to correspondence received if needed prior to its consideration. So going back to Mayor Collier then, did you be able to find your question?
Thank you, Jay. It was something to do with, and I've just been reading through desperately trying to find it, something to do with the fact that this is actually a slight reduction, if I read it correctly. And I just want to confirm that I'm reading that correctly. It was on page 14 of the agenda. Should be noted that this represents a slight reduction in the Parkland Dedication Collective for medium and high density residential compared to the town's current practice requiring a greater value of 5% or 1 hectare per 300. And I just wanted to confirm I was understanding that correctly. McCullough?
Through the chair, Mayor Collier, that's correct. So as I mentioned, our current practice has been to apply the rates that are in the Planning Act. But of course, on September 18th, those rates will expire, if you will, and we'll no longer be able to collect them until we pass the new bylaw. But that's why, based on this work, we're recommending slightly adjusted maximum contributions for our bylaw itself.
Okay, and sorry, it's hard to concentrate. There's a lot of noise outside here. Just to be clear, one of the letters we received from Bill was giving a number of options and a number of recommendations from other municipalities, but you have pointed out that what we're asking here in several examples in the report is already much less than a lot of other municipalities, maybe not the ones they mentioned, but we're definitely, looks like, in line with most municipalities, especially those in Durham.
So through the chair to Mayor Collier, I believe the part in the letter that you're referring to, there were some different practices that I think are more policy related practices that differ in municipalities. But the one item that they did highlight was various maximums that are applied in terms of a percentage, not a unit per hectare basis. So in this bylaw, we're actually not proposing to apply the maximum percentage here. In their letter, they refer, I believe it was between 10 and 25% of land area acts as a maximum. But I do note that the Watson report did identify some municipalities that had higher maximums, up to 35% of the land area. And the analysis that they're completed as part of our background, the low and medium density is below those maximum ranges or within them, whereas the high comes in at about 40 to 45% of developable land area if we were to look at it that way. But in this case, we're not applying a maximum.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Those are my questions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mayor Collier. Would any of the members of the committee like to ask any questions or comments? Seeing none, then I will call to vote. All in favor? Opposed? And that passes. Thank you very much, Mr. McCullough. So moving on now, we will now go to item number 4.2. Continuing with our public meeting items, we have item PDS 2022-22, the zoning bylaw amendment for application Z6/20-269-5986 Ontario Incorporated regarding 290 Old Harwood Avenue. I believe we have Eric Simpson, Senior Planner, to present.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good evening, Mr. Chair and members of Council, as well as those members of the public who are joining us virtually. My name is Eric Simpson, and I'm the planner responsible for processing the submitted development proposal. My presentation will provide a summary on the development proposal and submitted development applications, provide an evaluation of the development proposal and related land use planning policy context, and outline and address comments received regarding the proposal. Please note that this meeting serves as a statutory public meeting for the committee to consider and make a decision on the submitted zoning bylaw amendment application. The continued review and final approval of the submitted site plan application will be completed by staff. Next slide, please. The subject lands, municipally known as 290 Old Harwood Avenue, are located at the northwest corner of Old Harwood Avenue and Bantham Lane. The subject lands have frontage along Old Harwood Avenue, a public road, and frontage along Bantham Lane, a private lane servicing the adjacent existing development site. The subject lands are currently vacant. The subject lands are surrounded by the following land uses. Immediately west and south is a residential condominium consisting of bungalow townhouse dwellings. This seniors development is known as Henderson Place and is serviced by Bantham Lane, Gidley Lane, Tadman Lane, and Hirschfield Lane. Directly south of this is a 4-story seniors building, the Chartwell Retirement Residence. Further west and south are residential lands consisting of single detached dwellings, and further south of that is a residential condominium consisting of 3-story townhouse dwellings. To the north are residential lands consisting of single detached dwellings, and to the east are residential lands consisting of single detached and townhouse dwellings. Next slide, please. In 2001, Town of Ajax Council approved a zoning bylaw amendment application which established zoning exception 59. Exception 59 was established to permit the development of a 48-unit seniors development consisting of bungalow townhouse dwellings and a related seniors building on an original land holding municipally known as 290 Old Harwood Avenue. This land holding was comprised of the current subject lands and the abutting lands to the west and south of the subject lands, which currently include the existing Henderson Place development. At the time, it was intended that these lands would consist of a 2-phased adult lifestyle community. The zoning bylaw was tailored around a conceptual site plan, as illustrated on the screen, that proposed a seniors building in the center of the development site surrounded by bungalow townhouse dwellings. As a result, site-specific development standards were established based on this intended location. In 2003, a site plan application was submitted to develop the 48 condominium bungalow townhouse dwellings, a private park, and the preservation and restoration of the existing Henderson House as a common element, which all represents the existing Henderson Place development. The seniors building was not part of this development proposal. The bungalow townhouse dwellings were approved and constructed based on a revised development concept that set aside lands for the future development of the seniors building. The layout of the overall Henderson Place development was revised to separate the proposed seniors building from the balance of the development as a result of previous purchaser concerns regarding the infiltration of traffic from the seniors building into the townhouse section of the development. Once the plan of condominium was registered, the land set aside for the seniors building naturally severed and became a separate parcel municipally known today as 290 Old Harwood Avenue. And that is the subject lands as illustrated on the screen. The subject lands have remained vacant since the completion of the first phase of the Henderson Place development. Development applications were previously submitted for the development of the subject lands, however, neither application was approved. The first application in 2005 proposed the development of a 4-story, 76-unit seniors building, while the second application in 2013 proposed the development of 23-story back-to-back townhouse dwellings designed for seniors. As a result of the phasing, the subject lands have an easement over the common elements of the Henderson Place condominium. This includes an easement for access purposes over Bantham Lane. Next slide, please. The owner has submitted a zoning bylaw amendment application and site plan application to permit the development of a 6-story apartment building consisting up to 121 seniors rental dwelling units. The purpose of the zoning bylaw amendment is to modify the existing zoning exception, Exception 59, that applies to the subject lands in order to establish new site-specific development standards that would implement the proposed development. The amendment is discussed in detail in the following slides. A site plan application has been submitted to evaluate, review, and address all technical and functional details of the proposed development. Approval of this application will include the finalization of all drawings and reports, entering into the necessary agreements, and satisfying all conditions of development. Next slide, please. The proposed development consists of a 6-story apartment building. The proposed building will cover the majority of the frontage of the subject lands and will be sited directly adjacent to the surrounding streets. The principal building entrances will be located along the east and north building facades. Walkways are proposed along the east and south sides of the building. As the subject lands have frontage onto Bantham Lane and there's an existing access easement in place for the use of such, the development proposal intends to utilize Bantham Lane for access purposes. The development proposal includes one site access off Bantham Lane and one site access off Old Harwood Avenue. The Bantham Lane site access will be integrated into the design of the building, as the western end of the building will cantilever over the internal drive aisle leading to the site access. One level of underground parking and surface level parking is proposed. The vehicle entrance and ramp to the underground parking will be integrated into the northwest corner of the building, accessed from the covered drive aisle. Surface level parking spaces are proposed along the western limits and northern limits of the development site. The ground floor will include features such as multi-purpose rooms for resident and visitor use, storage lockers, and bicycle and scooter storage space. 5 dwelling units are also proposed on the ground floor. The second to fifth stories of the building will include approximately 21 to 32 units per story, consisting predominantly of 1-bedroom units. All units will contain full kitchen and bathroom facilities, and no special care and/or meal preparation services will be provided through the building. The proposed building will function as an apartment dwelling specifically for seniors and not a retirement home or a nursing/long-term care home where more lodging-style units are included and various services are provided. Common outdoor amenity space in the form of a rooftop terrace and grim roof is proposed on top of the 6-story. The common outdoor amenity space will include extensive landscaping, a pergola, seating areas, a barbecue station, and community planting boxes. As per the condominium declaration for the existing Henderson Place development, ownership of the existing private park is shared between the condominium corporation and the subject lands. The park is considered to be a shared facility, and a shared facilities agreement is in place between the condominium corporation and the owner of the subject lands. It is the intent of the owner that the future tenants of the proposed seniors building will have access to this existing private park. The proposed use of the park is secured through the existing common ownership and shared facilities agreement. Any proposed modifications to the park will require the consent of the condominium corporation and will be further reviewed through the continued review and approval process of the site plan application. Next slide, please. In accordance with urban design policies of the official plan, the proposed development will include a variation in massing and articulate visible wall surfaces through various architectural design features to create a dynamic design and reduce the visual scale of the building. It will be sited parallel to both street frontages to define the street edge with principal entrance connections, include transparent glazing and frequent entrances along the ground floor to promote an active street frontage, include weather protection devices such as canopies and roof overhangs, provide amenity for the adjacent public realms such as benches and bicycle racks, maximize the amount of building frontage along both street frontages, screen all loading areas and service entries from the street, integrate the underground parking entrance into the design of the building to minimize the visual impact of vehicle access points, provide landscape edges for the surface level parking to maximize infiltration of surface water and reduce the scale of the parking area on the street and adjacent properties. The proposed development will incorporate safe community design, barrier-free design, and green building environmental design elements to provide an overall urban design that conforms with the policies of the official plan. This includes the provision of bicycle storage facilities, barrier-free dwelling units within the building, barrier-free parking spaces, and barrier-free building entrances and pedestrian connections, new on-site tree planting within the surface level parking area, as well as rooftop amenity area, and street tree planting to help maintain and enhance the urban tree canopy, provide adequate lighting throughout the development site, provide a building design that includes green roofs and a rooftop amenity area incorporating a considerable portion of green space to reduce energy use through shading and sheltering, reduce the urban heat island effect, and reduce stormwater runoff. The use of a renewable energy source, a geothermal energy system for the building, which will reduce the need for heating boilers and a cooling tower, which will reduce carbon emissions and operating costs for the building. And lastly, an active transportation and transit supportive design to reduce the amount of vehicles accessing the development. Next slide, please. The subject lands are currently zoned residential multiple 5 RM5 zone and subject to exception 59 within the zoning bylaw. The existing Henderson Place development is also subject to the same zoning. The RM5 zone permits multiple attached dwellings, commonly referred to as block townhouse dwellings or condominium townhouse dwellings, and a senior citizen's apartment. Exception 59 is a result of the previous zoning bylaw amendment and development concept as previously outlined. Exception 59 specifically permits the existing townhouse dwellings and a senior citizen's apartment. It also sets site-specific development standards for the existing townhouse dwellings and for the development of the senior citizen's apartment, more specifically minimum setback, maximum lot coverage, maximum building height, and minimum parking rate requirements. These development standards were based on the previous development concept. As a result of this, and given that the subject lands are now a separate parcel, achieving zoning compliance on the subject lands is not realistic. It should be noted that the previous development applications for the subject lands both required minor variance application approval processes in order to address the impractical zoning conditions. In order to accommodate the development proposal, the applicant is requesting that the zoning bylaw be amended to modify exception 59 in order to establish new site-specific development standards. The site-specific development standards include, but are not limited to, zoning provisions related to maximum building height, minimum building setbacks, and minimum parking space requirements. Next slide, please. The identified studies and reports were submitted in support of the development proposal and have been reviewed by town and regional staff. In addition to these studies and reports, other technical documents were submitted in support of the proposal. Next slide, please. The development applications were reviewed against the applicable provincial, regional, and town land use planning policy. The specific policies are outlined and addressed in detail in the staff report. As per the report, the development proposal is consistent with the policies of the PPS and conforms with the policies of the Growth Plan, Regional Official Plan, and Town Official Plan. Next slide. A transportation impact study was submitted in support of the development proposal. The study identifies the estimated development-related traffic and the subsequent traffic-related impacts on the surrounding road network. The impacts are based on existing road network conditions and projected future background traffic as a result of growth. The proposed development is estimated to generate up to 30 two-way trips and 39 two-way trips during weekday AM and PM peak hours, respectively. Under future total traffic conditions, the Harwood Avenue North and Chapman Drive signalized intersection is expected to operate similar to future background conditions. Negligible increases in delay are anticipated for the unsignalized intersections of Old Harwood Avenue and McGill Drive, Old Harwood Avenue and Bantham Lane, and Old Harwood Avenue and Chapman Drive. The proposed site accesses are also expected to operate well, as the capacity analysis demonstrates minimum delays and queuing for the site accesses. Overall, the proposed development is expected to have a minimal traffic impact on the traffic operations of the surrounding road network. The development proposal includes one site access off of Bantham Lane and one site access off of Old Harwood Avenue. As two site accesses are proposed and the underground parking ramp has now been revised to no longer front onto Bantham Lane, it is not anticipated that all development-related traffic will utilize Bantham Lane for access purposes. Development-related traffic will be split between the two proposed site accesses. A security gate system is in place at the western end of Bantham Lane to limit vehicle access to the existing Henderson Place development. The proposed development respects this as the existing gate system will remain in place. As a result, the proposed development will not result in undesired traffic filtering into the existing development site. As per exception 59, a minimum parking rate of 0.25 parking spaces per unit is permitted. The parking supply for the proposed development will yield a minimum parking rate of 0.66 parking spaces per dwelling unit. for the use of residents and visitors. The proposed development includes a parking supply that exceeds the requirements of the zoning bylaw and that is adequate for the anticipated parking demand of the development. As a result, it is not anticipated that the proposed development will lead to an influx of on-street parking. A walkway along the south side of the building and north side of Bantham Lane is proposed, which will ensure a continuous pedestrian connection from the Henderson Place development to Old Harwood Avenue. In addition, the existing walkway located on the south side of Bantham Lane is proposed to be connected to the Old Harwood Avenue sidewalk. Walkways on both sides of Bantham Lane will provide safe and clear pedestrian paths to travel for existing and future residents. Next slide, please. Building elevations and sections, as illustrated on the screen, have been prepared, which demonstrate that the proposed development will be set below a 45-degree angular plane as measured from the adjacent low-density residential area. More specifically, the common lot line representing the north property line of the subject lands and the rear lot line of the properties municipally known as 3, 5, and 7 Sheldon Drive, and the south interior side lot line of the property municipally known as 366 Old Harwood Avenue. Angular planes are used to ensure an appropriate transition in building height to adjacent existing development and to ensure that sufficient sunlight is maintained for adjacent existing development. As per the official plan, the 45-degree angular plan policy requirement only applies to adjacent low-density residential areas and therefore has been applied to the north property line in this instance, as the west, south, and east property lines of the subject lands abut medium-density residential areas. Along the north side of the building, the upper stories, specifically stories 5 to 6, will be stepped back southwards from the 4 stories below. Variations in roof, parapet, height, and design are also proposed to achieve conformity with the 45-degree angular plane. This variation in massing will reduce the visual scale of the building and minimize adverse impacts as it relates to sunlight and sky view access on the adjacent low-density residential area. As Juliet balconies are proposed, there will be no projecting balconies to heighten any potential exposure and privacy impacts to the surrounding residential areas. The proposed development will include a building height of 6 stories and contribute to an overall density of 58 units per net hectare, which conforms with the built form, specifically dwelling type, height, and density permissions of the medium density residential designation, the land use designation regulating the subject lands. Next slide, please. Sun and shadow diagrams were prepared in support of the development proposal to evaluate potential impacts on adjacent residential properties as it relates to sunlight. The diagrams illustrate the anticipated sun and shadow conditions for hourly intervals for the following dates: March 21st, the spring equinox, June 21st, the summer solstice, September 21st, the fall equinox, and December 21st, the winter solstice. For March 21st and September 21st, the diagrams illustrate shadow impacts to the rear yards of the residential properties to the north and west during the morning, specifically between 9 and 11 a.m., and shadow impacts to the front yards of the adjacent properties to the east during the late afternoon. For June 21st, the diagrams illustrate shadow impacts to the front and side yards of the residential properties to the west during the morning, specifically between 9 and 11 a.m. For December 21st, the diagrams illustrate constant shadow impacts to the residential properties to the north throughout the day. However, it should be noted that the existing mature trees located in the rear yards of the abutting residential properties already contribute to considerable shading. Additional sun and shadow diagrams were prepared to illustrate sun and shadow conditions from the existing trees. The diagrams illustrate that the rear yards of the properties containing such trees already experience considerable shadow impacts. Considerable shadow impacts are anticipated for the winter solstice date. However, when considering the existing tree shadowing, the development shadow impacts are considered to be negligible. Overall, it is anticipated that the shadow impacts of the proposed development will be minor. The proposed development will not adversely impact the surrounding neighborhood from a sunlight and shadow perspective. Next slide, please. As previously mentioned, common outdoor amenity space in the form of a rooftop terrace and green roof is proposed on top of the 6th story. Parapets are proposed on all sides of the rooftop amenity space. In addition, parapet height concrete planter walls are proposed at all 4 corners of the rooftop amenity space. The design of the rooftop amenity space will minimize views into surrounding residential properties, reducing potential exposure and privacy impacts. A landscape buffer is proposed along the north property line, which will enable the preservation of the existing mature trees located in the rear yards of the abutting residential properties. A landscape buffer with new tree plantings and a new wood privacy fence is also proposed along the west property line. These landscape buffers and elements will help mitigate potential adverse impacts from the proposed development on the surrounding residential properties, such as light and noise impacts from the parking area. Overall, the proposed building height, massing, siting, and site features and elements of the development proposal have been designed to mitigate adverse impacts on adjacent properties and provide a development proposal that is compatible with the surrounding neighborhood. Next slide, please. Staff have carefully reviewed the proposal as well as all comments and concerns received from the public and are of the opinion that the proposed development makes efficient use of underutilized land within the town and provides for housing intensification and diversification to help contribute towards the town and regional goal of providing a mix of housing types and sizes to serve residents of various household sizes, incomes, and ages. The provision of seniors' rental dwelling units will assist in providing housing opportunities for the aging population to assist in meeting the needs of current and future town residents. The original intent was to develop a phased adult lifestyle community with bungalow townhouse dwellings and a 4-story seniors building. The development intent was inspired from the late Dr. Henderson. While the size and design of the building has changed from the previous development concept, the proposed development will still consist of a seniors building contributing to the envisioned adult lifestyle community for the area. The proposed 6-story building conforms with the height permissions of the medium density residential designation and is reflective of current development trends in the overarching land use planning policy framework. The proposed development will enhance the character of the area and, in the opinion of staff, represents compatible infill development that is sensitive to the existing character of the surrounding neighborhood. Therefore, staff recommend approval of the zoning bylaw amendment application. The continued review and ultimate approval of the site plan application will be completed by staff and other applicable agencies. Next slide. That concludes my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Simpson. So we'll now ask the committee for questions of the presentation. We haven't called out the report yet, so we'll start with Councillor Tyler Moore.
Thank you so much, Chair, for this, and thank you, Mr. Simpson, for your continuing work on this file. I know that you've been going through various stages of it. In your presentation, are you able to bring up page 11? Can we do that? Is that all shut down, or are we able to go back to that? I just think it's an important page that I want to draw reference to. Is that page 11? If maybe the one before? It's the one that speaks to, just keep going back. I'm sorry, I thought it was page 11. Okay, that one more, please. Sorry, that one. Thank you so much. So in regards to what we're doing tonight in amending the zoning bylaw, I think it's important that, we all know that this land use planning policy, it meets the provincial policy statement. It meets a place to growth, which is basically the province that deems us a place to grow. It's part of the Durham Region official plan, and it's part of the Town of Ajax official plan. It's, difficult for us because the development, as per the recommendation from staff, has all this as part of it. So I just think when I look at that, it's a bit daunting, but it's obviously something that makes the proposal and the question to us fairly difficult because there's, the old only one answer here based on what we see in this place. But it's something that we've been working on. I'm glad to see so many residents tonight involved in this. And I know that Regional Councillor Crawford and I have met with the Henderson Place staff and board, I should say, as well as Chartwell. We've gone and talked to most of the residents, visiting almost every house in the area on Ton Crescent, Tasker Crescent, Sheldon, as well as Booth, and all along Old Harwood. So we're on this, but I understand that these meet a lot of the planning policies. Okay, just some comments there, not necessarily a question. Thank you.
Very good. So just to confirm, Mr. Simpson, kind of rephrasing, in a sense, would you say that the municipality is somewhat bound to these various policies in regards to our decision making today?
Mr. Chair, yeah, correct. Any approval, well, any consideration of a zoning bylaw amendment application has to have regard for conforming with the provincial policies and the regional policies in place.
Thank you very much. Do any of the members of committee have any questions? Seeing none, we will now open up this meeting to the public and invite comments and questions. We will go to the clerk to see on the speaker list from the delegates. Please note, delegates, only unmute when you are asked to speak to address the committee. Otherwise, it's going to get some feedback and we'll be able to hear certain people. And most importantly, each delegation, because of the number of delegates, we're going to stick to the 5 minutes to address the committee. So if you have any questions, don't wait for the response. Ask all your questions and we'll address those questions to the appropriate staff member as needed. So, Mr. Clerk, who do we have first as our delegate speaker?
Chair, the first delegate is Andrei Cherkov.
Andrei, are you there? Can you hear us?
Yeah.
And you can go ahead then, please.
Do you hear me?
Yes.
So thank you very much for giving me a chance, like few minutes to talk. And actually, I'm trying to be brief as much as possible. So concern by concern, the first one is I don't understand why seniority concerns presented and who brought this to our attention, because there is no any legal obligation for the developer to provide this service to seniority. And actually brochure saying about seniority as well. And I consider this a misrepresentative because I did check all documents from all submissions, and I'm gonna state there is no legal obligation and the developer not bound with this seniority concern. Second one is about safety. I already sent to the town of Ajax my concern, because I consider myself, based on work I am doing, structural person, and about 50% of units of this building to be seated on the few structural columns which are not protected by traffic protective hardware. By the case, during this long weekend, we met case when a few hours, one certain pier of certain provincial bridge was not protected, and we initiated this concern to ministry. So concern number one, safety. Structural one. Many units to be sit on the columns which are not protected, and any potential scenario, garbage truck removal, fire truck, construction truck, maintenance equipment, or whatever. Second one, pedestrian sidewalk along south side of the building. And I've seen this proposal saying like this way looks safe and clear. Absolutely disagree. South sidewalk looks for me absolutely unsafe and unclear for traveling off public. Why? Because every local resident memorized this winter we have up to 1.4 meter of compacted snow after snow removal, and we are lucky because we have a buffer zone with where the snow to be located after removed from snow plow. And there is nothing like that along southern sidewalk. It's a second safety concern. Environmental, next one. So I did very precisely read second submission arborist review, because myself and neighbor on 5 Sheldon Drive has excellent blue spruces, like up to, I would say, 30 meters of height, and like I would say 60, 70 years old. And I know the town of Ajax environmental department has 5 certified ISA certified arborists. And actually, this arborist review proves that drip line not measured, age of trees not taken into consideration, exposed roots are not taken into consideration, and actually tree protection zone counted incorrectly and not in accordance with the ISA arborist study guide. ISA arborist only one person who could do evaluation of the trees, and this guide given exactly for this certified specialist. Acting against this guide means acting against tree protection below. About a couple was about number of parking lots. In first submission, it used to be 84 parking lots. And right now it has been reduced to 28 second submission. So it's going to be one parking lot like for 4 rental units. Very simple question. Would be this convenient for potential tenants or local residents which meet crowded parking on the street? And we have a lot of space in Ajax, and I don't know why we need to tie this 6-story building and make inconvenient condition regarding parking lots to prospective tenants, and actually reducing of parking lot. Is it care about even seniority or not seniority? One thing I would like to bring to attention all participants in the meeting, because in January this year we have 3 healthy trees removed on the Old Harwood. And I sent email to town of Ajax staff, and I got email responded that the town is not aware of any other tree removals, and in one sentence, trees that are removed on site within the boulevard are required to be compensated.
Mr. Cherkov, I'm so sorry, that is your time.
Okay,
So we'll
finalizing. I am finalizing. So 6-story rental apartment building does not match the landscape in our neighborhood. Public safety and convenience concern exist on submitting design. Environmental tree preservation requirement criteria are not.
Okay, thank you, Mr.
Yeah, so yeah, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Cherkov. Mr. Simpson, did you want to address any of the points made?
I don't think there are any specific questions, but I mean, just a couple of points of clarification.
Sure.
The arborist report was prepared by a certified arborist. Our staff have reviewed the arborist report. We are in agreement with the conclusions of it. It did factor in the drip line. It did look at other municipalities' methodologies for determining tree protection zones. And we are satisfied with the conclusions of that. There is over 80 parking spaces proposed. It's not just the surface level parking spaces. There is one underground level as well. Detailed building permit drawings have not been prepared at this point in time. So I'm not entirely sure of the construction details that Mr. Cherkov was alluding to, but anything that does get submitted at a later date would have to conform with Ontario Building Code requirements.
Okay. Regional Councilor Crawford, you had a question or a comment?
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair. I'm just curious. This gentleman had mentioned that trees were taken down that were not authorized. Did that happen? And if it's so, will they be replaced?
Through you, Mr. Chair, to Regional Councilor Crawford. Yes, in the winter, there were trees that were removed. It did stem from the windstorm that we had in December. And then there were some additional trees that we weren't aware of at the time that were removed. We are aware of all the removals that have been taken down now. It is all trees that were anticipated to be removed for the development regardless. And regardless of them being removed, it is all things that will have to be compensated for. So compensation is done through either the proposed on-site planting that they have proposed or through cash in lieu if what they proposed on site will not equate to the amount that's required.
Okay, thank you. So nothing, okay, that's good. Thank you so much.
Next, we had Mayor Collier.
Actually, Chair, Regional Councilor Crawford kind of asked my question was to do with the letter of credit that's required to be provided by the developer in case some of the trees are damaged. I wonder if you could speak to that, please, Mr. Simpson.
Through you, Mr. Chair, to Mayor Collier, there will be no securities collected for like neighboring trees. All the trees on the neighboring properties are to be preserved. There's tree hoarding in place that we will protect, collect securities for. But as per the arborist report, over a 4-meter tree protection zones proposed, so it's not anticipated that there'd be any impacts. There were in the previous proposals only a 2-meter tree protection zone, which did stir up some concerns, but all of that has been addressed now. Other than that, yeah, it's just securities for tree protection hoarding. And then we collect securities for the new planting, or we collect cash for anything to offset and compensate for what's been removed on site.
Mayor Collier, any further questions?
No, that's fine. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions from committee before to the next delegate? Seeing none, Mr. Clerk, the next delegate, please.
The next delegate chair is Andrew Slater.
Andrew Slater, can you turn on your mic?
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening. And whenever you're ready, your 5 minutes.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Chair, Mr. Mayor, councilors, staff, and guests. We appreciate all your commitment to our township, to this process, and we're grateful especially to Councilor Crawford and Tyler Moran, who have been supporting us throughout this process. My name is Andrew Slater. I'm an Ontario licensed property manager, and I'm representing the 48 unit owners from Henderson Place. Henderson Place is now in its 17th year, and it's become a fixture in the community. I'm very happy to service the community. We hope that you have reviewed the correspondence which we submitted on both March 2nd and September 1st, along with the numerous other letters from the Henderson and surrounding communities that were attached to this agenda. I believe Mr. Simpson stated to me at one point there's over 150 pages of correspondence. The proposal of the zoning change in the site plan application does not have the support of the condominium community and does not have the support of the local residential community, to my understanding. My client, Henderson Place, was not pleased with the timing of this meeting in that a 3-week window was provided. I would imagine that meets all the requirements, but first and foremost, we have key members of our community away, and we're not given adequate notice to attend this meeting. My second item is a reference to modifying the existing zoning section 59. I think the senior planner's description of this parcel was the zoning is impractical. And I understand that to some extent because the setbacks are 20 meters and that would be impractical. But the zoning application is also to change the height of the building. And although that meets everybody's standards, provincial, regional, town, I don't see any check mark beside the community's name there. And I know it's not a requirement to meet any standard of the community, but I do feel that the community is underrepresented in this situation. The change in the design of the building has not ultimately changed in the height of the building, and that doesn't seem to be of concern to anyone but ourselves. We were told, owners back in 2005, we're told what was going to be built there, and subsequent to that, what was going to be built there. And at no time was a 6-story building ever under consideration. Bantham Lane is a primary means of access and egress for 48 residents in that community. And I can assure you, based on my 30 years experience of property management, and although it is going to be zoned as fire route, it will be an occupied laneway. There will be staging of vehicles there on a continuous basis. My experience in any kind of multi-residential development is that parking is inadequate at best, no fault of the towns. The town has certain standards they must follow, but parking at these facilities is inadequate at best. I'm not sure what accommodations are there for guest parking, but I assure you that staging and stopping will take place on Bantham Lane, and I have no doubt in my mind that will happen. I would like to reiterate what was said by the first speaker in that there's no obligation for this developer to market to seniors, that it is a marketing concept. It is not a requirement to our understanding. It is not designated as a seniors building. So who knows, 5 years from now, we could have 50% seniors, 50% families, regular families, multiple vehicles. Again, it's going to be a problem going forward. 121 seniors rental dwelling units is a misnomer and misrepresentation at best. And we object to the non-binding nature of this portion of the submission. I want to speak on behalf of the owners of 2 Gidley Lane, who are the unit directly west of the building, who are in the shadow and will be in the shadow of this building in perpetuity. I would imagine had they had the wherewithal to explore what was going to be built on the vacant lot, there would be no indication at that time that a 6-story building was going to be there. And I'm sure that would have affected their purchase decision and possibly the purchase price. They won't see sunlight till noon. I know them very well. They're a lovely old couple. And unfortunately, they probably don't have the wherewithal to speak for themselves. I did want to ask Eric, and you can answer at the end, Eric, about the angular plane, the reference to the north side of the building. And you mentioned that applies to low residential. And I'm curious as to know why that doesn't apply to multi or higher density residential, and why it wouldn't apply on the west side of the building.
Mr. Slater, that's your time. I'll get you to ask maybe one more question if you have one.
No, I think I would just summarize in saying the primary concerns of this community are the height of the building, the control of Bantam Lane, and what was promised and what is being delivered are at extreme opposites. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Simpson, I think that you had a last question there. Did you want to address that?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair and Mr. Slater. Just one point of clarification regarding the seniors aspect. So with the way the zoning has been and will continue to be, even with this amendment, it specifically only permits a senior citizens apartment, which is saying that it's a building specifically for seniors. So if someone were to market or ultimately lease this out for that, they'd be in violation of the zoning. So I just wanted to point that out. In terms of the 45-degree angular plane, yes, correct. It only applies to lands designated as low-density residential. Typically, these would be areas that include single detached dwellings, could be bungalow to 2 stories. In this case, that is only to the north. The entire Henderson Place area, as well as the lands to the south of the chart rail, are all medium. Even the lands to the west, closer to Harwood, are also medium. I realize that, yes, the Henderson Place consists of bungalows, however, it is part of a medium density residential designation. So the 45-degree angular plane does not apply to that property line to the west and south. And I just want to reiterate that the official plan does permit up to 6 stories in this location.
Thank you. I believe I saw Councillor Tyler Moran's hand.
Yeah, just quickly. Thank you, Mr. Slater, for your comments and your points. It's been good working together on this, and hopefully the members of Henderson Place in the area see that Marilyn Crawford and I have, we did represent as best we could and as consistently as we could with staff. I do have a question to Mr. Simpson. Can you just clarify? There was various stages of this, at least in conversation and in some of the submissions for site plan number 2, where the building was going to be 7 stories, correct? And there was going to be only surface parking. But can you confirm that now it's 6 stories? And can you just quickly go through that?
Sure, yeah. Through you, Mr. Chair, to Councillor Tyler Moran. Originally, in the first submission, it was for a 7-story building that actually included a split demographic. It wasn't just seniors buildings. They had intended it to be affordable rental market units as well. That included surface parking as well as 1 level of underground. It then changed in the second submission to lower the height to 6 stories. At that point, it was switched to just seniors. And they were exploring a model that was more closer to a long-term care, if you will. There was, reliance on services. Each unit may not, function as an independent unit. So at that point, the underground level was removed and it was just surface parking spaces. However, the newest proposal, the newest concept is still 6 stories. It's just seniors as well. It's just, it won't be a retirement home. It won't be a long-term care. It's just an apartment building that's specifically for seniors. So there'll be independent units. There won't be, common eating areas. Every unit will basically be on its own. And there is still one level of underground as well as the surface parking.
Okay, through the chair. And I'm glad for that summation, because from the perspective of a resident just sort of tapping into this now, they see this as it is. Whereas from our perspective, we feel that we've not negotiated, but tried to get it down a floor, get it designated as only seniors, get an underground parking. We see these as wins or the step in the right direction for what ultimately will be a new development in our Ward 1. Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Simpson, for that clarity and information.
Any other members of committee? Mr. Simpson, you mentioned that they can't market as anything outside of the seniors designation. What happens if they do? Is there some sort of penalty, or can the town do anything in that case?
Well, I mean, the town has no control over how they market it. But if, the town were to find out that this building was being used for, something that's not a seniors building, then we would have the right to get our bylaw services staff involved, as it is a zoning violation.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you. Moving on to the next delegate, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Chair, the next delegate is Anna Sabern.
Anna, are you there right now? If you could perhaps unmute yourself.
Yes. My comments were, Eric gave me two properties that were supposed to be similar to the project at 290 Old Harwood. One was the Chartwell development, and the other was a parcel of land at 253-255 Lake Driveway. I don't see any comparison at all. These are both large properties with good road access. There's no comparison. And in fact, this project seems to be a first for the town of Ajax. I don't think it warrants a bylaw amendment to increase the height and density to the detriment of surrounding owners. And I would ask that the planning department decline the application as submitted.
Thank you, Anna. Did you have you have about 4 minutes left? Is there anything else you wanted to add on to that?
No, other than I think they probably could better use that little parcel with a doctor's office or a dentist's office, like something Dr. Henderson had his office on this property to start with. And I think a small commercial building there with offices would be way better than a 6-story apartment.
Okay. Thank you very much for your delegation. Do any members of committee have any questions? Okay, moving on. Mr. Clerk, to the next one, please.
Mr. Clerk, or Mr. Chair, the next delegate is Ian and Monica Thompson.
Are the Thompsons, can they unmute, please? And as soon as you are ready, we'll start.
Hello, no, we were not on the delegate list.
Okay. Thank you very much. We'll move on to the next one. Mr. Clark.
Mr. Chair, the next delegate is Anthony Ming.
Yes, thanks very much. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Go ahead.
Okay. First of all, I'd just like to thank Mr. Simpson for a very detailed presentation. And I just have a couple of questions that is quite bothering and is quite troublesome. Why is it that the town of Ajax prefers the proposal instead of listening to what the community is saying? Why is it so important to actually accept verbatim what the proposal is and not take into consideration the issues, the concerns that we have within the community? The second question is that it was alluded to that compromises were made, but I believe that the developer made the initial submission knowing that it will not be accepted. And as a consequence, what we gave them was more than what they wanted. And I think the concept of a compromise, I think, is quite an absurd comment. It is not a compromise. It's just part of the negotiating tactic. The third thing is that it seems to me that, we in this community, we bought our houses, as alluded to before, with the notion, right, that we have a 4-story building and it's for seniors. And now we are faced with a situation whereby the property value will be decreased. And of course, right, the properties in this area, especially within Henderson Place, I'm from 24 Henderson Place, will be decreased substantially because of what's happening to that building. So my concern in a summary is that why is it that this Ajax Council listened and will agree to a proposal and not listen to the actual residents who have raised these concerns? That to me is something I cannot comprehend. We are taxpayers paying taxes currently into the Ajax community and budgets. So why is it? The second thing is that we went through, right, a significant issues with the developer of Henderson Place. What is there to guarantee that the same thing will not happen to this developer who is building a proposed 6-story building? What is there that will prevent all these issues we've encountered and not let this happen again? And when these issues are being stated, what did Ajax do? Nothing. Nothing. Why? Why is it that you are taking the side of the developer and not listening to what we are saying to you? Why? Is it going to raise taxes and you get more revenues into the Ajax fund? Is that enough to compensate for the issues and the concerns that we have in a community that we have lived here for over 50 years? Why? Answer those questions, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ming. Would any members of committee like to address Mayor Collier? Did I see your hand there?
Thank you, Chair. I don't mind answering some of Mr. Ming's questions. I'm not going to get into a debate about it, but I'm happy to explain the process. And I'm your neighbor. I also live in the community. I live on Sheldon Drive. So I am part of this community, and I've lived in Ajax since 1969. So I remember when there was nothing north, and I knew Dr. Henderson before he died. So I'm very, very, very familiar with this location and this development. But your question was, why are we siding with the developer, which is simply not true. I trust you've read the report, and in the report, it very clearly speaks about the things that we have to follow: the Planning Act, the provincial policy statement, the places to grow, the Durham Regional Official Plan, the Town of Ajax Official Plan. The way this works is we have to follow those rules, whether we like it or not. And whether the residents say the building's too high or too low or there's traffic or whatever, we're not engineers, we're not planners, we're not lawyers, we're counselors. We each have our different backgrounds, but we have to listen to the professionals. And when the professional planners give us recommendations and say that this conforms to all these things, that's where we have to take our advice. That's our fiduciary duty to the corporation of the Town of Ajax. Ask questions, make sure you're getting reasonable assurance that you're making good, solid decisions. If we don't make solid decisions and we go with the with the residents, the few residents in the area that are speaking tonight, and no disrespect, and I'm not trying to denigrate or minimize what you're saying, but we represent 132,000 residents. And if 10 speak, I got to assume 130,900 are okay. And we do have to make decisions on the big picture. And if we turn this down against staff advice, the developer will appeal it to the Ontario Land Tribunal, and we will lose. And it will cost the Town of Ajax somewhere around $100,000 in an unwinnable Ontario Municipal Board appeal or Ontario Land Tribunal appeal. So I hope that's helped give a little bit of input to the process. And you're making an assumption that this is we're siding with the builder. That's not. I met with these builders several years ago and sent them back to the table because it was not conforming with the area. It wasn't a seniors building that was promised. It wasn't a lot of things. But now here we are. And, you know, to what was there in 2005 is one thing, but a lot has changed in the town and we need to change with it. And one of the things that's changed is density. And one of the things we badly need is seniors housing. And I won't go any further, Chair. I just, I hope that helped clarify the process for Mr. May. Thank you.
Thank you. Regional Councillor Crawford.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I just wanted to say that not this past election, 2018, but the election before that, one of the things that we heard loud and clear was that there was not enough housing for seniors and not enough rental units for seniors. Not all seniors are able to afford to buy a condominium. They can't afford to buy even a smaller townhouse. And so we needed to have some spaces for seniors to be able to move out of their homes, with grass cutting and gardening and whatnot, and be able to have a place where they can live. They can still live in Ajax, still live around their families, but not have to have the worry of their household. So when this application moved to a seniors only facility, I quite frankly was very happy with that because it satisfied a need that we have heard from our seniors that they need. Now, I do realize that that this particular parcel of land has gone through multiple changes from townhouses to 4-story to 7-story to 6 stories. And as the speaker before said, Councillor Morin and myself have met with your board on multiple occasions over the last 2 years since this application has been going through. And Mr. Simpson has been wonderful at providing answers that we've been able to provide back to the board. So we have not sided one bit with this developer. In fact, we have actually pushed back on a number of issues with this developer. Like Mayor Collier said, we have met with this developer and we have simply said it's not acceptable. We need X, Y, and Z, and they've come back to the table. And that is why this particular development has taken, I think it's been on the table, Eric, correct me if I'm wrong, but at least 4 years, if not longer. Is that correct?
Through you, Mr. Chair, to Regional Councillor Crawford. It was a 2020 application, so it's been 2 years.
I'm sorry, I missed that, sorry.
It's a 2020 application, so it's been 2 years.
Okay.
But I believe the owner was engaging the town before that, though, and you may have had discussions with them at that time. So, yeah.
Yes. Okay. Sorry. So that's basically all my comments on that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Moving on to the next delegate then.
I do have a follow-up. Is that allowed?
Unfortunately not.
Why?
Because the way the public meeting works is you're given 5 minutes to get your point across, then we have to move on to the next delegate.
Yeah, because I mean, what they're saying, I don't agree with. I mean, what the compromise is not a compromise. The developer knew that it will not be approved.
Sorry, Mr. Ming, I understand have your points, but unfortunately, we do have to follow the format that was outlined at the beginning.
But I didn't hear any formats. I mean, we didn't hear any protocols in terms of how the meeting will be functioning.
Yeah, I outlined at the beginning that each delegate will
when I joined
minutes.
the meeting, nothing as such was actually said to me, or said at least when I was on. But anyway.
Okay. I'm sorry. We did outline that.
Is that right? Okay. Well, yes, I didn't hear it. So I probably am deaf.
Okay. Then the clerk then to the next delegate.
Mr. Chair, the next delegate is Christine Dorward.
Is Christine Dorward? Can you unmute, Christine? Sorry, Christine, can you hear us and can you unmute, please? We see you're here. So, Mr. Clerk, there could be some technical problems on their end. Can we just bump Christine down into the queue? We'll go to the next person and come back to her, and hopefully her tech issues will be resolved.
Yes, absolutely. Mr. Chair, the next delegate is Maureen Dyke.
Is Maureen Dyke available? Can you unmute, please? Maureen Dyke, if you can hear us, if you can unmute. Okay, Mr. Clerk, we'll move Maureen Dyke to down the queue and ask for the next delegate.
Mr. Chair, the next delegate is Robert Patterson.
Is Robert Patterson available to speak? Robert Patterson, if you can unmute and start your delegation. Okay, moving on to the next one. Well, again, we'll get back to Mr. Patterson. Hopefully they can work out their issues. Mr. Clark?
Mr. Chair, the next delegate is Norma Dix.
Norma Dix, if you can hear me, if you can unmute yourself and begin your delegation.
I'm strictly here to listen to the individuals that know more about it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I did see, Mr. Clerk, Maureen Dyke had briefly unmuted. Maureen, if you're there, could you unmute again, please? Nope, it's my fault. And Norma, if you actually just remute yourself just so we don't get any cross feeds. Thank you. Moving on to the next delegate, Mr. Clark.
The next delegate, and it's not clear if they're here to address item 4.2, is Ian McNeil.
Ian McNeil, are you available to speak?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
Yes. And are you here in regards to the...
Yes, I am. I'm at 16 Gidley Lane. I've been for 17 years.
Perfect. Then you can please start your delegation and your 5 minutes start.
Okay. I just want to say that this building is lovely. It's beautiful. It would look very nice on Harwood Avenue, not Old Harwood Avenue, and where it wouldn't have single family development around it. It would have other likewise apartment buildings. And I think it would be a perfect candidate for the Ajax Plaza, where you can get all these built 20 stories high, as much tall as you want to go. I feel that it's totally inappropriate for a residential area to have this monstrosity built with aluminum and glass, not a brick in it. All the houses around here are brick. Doesn't even conform to the building standards of a residential house. That's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. McNeil. Would any of the members of committee like to address the comments? No? Okay, then moving on to the next person, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Chair, the next delegate, and again, it's not clear if they are here to address item 4.2, is Joe Sheehan.
Joe Sheehan, if you're available, if you can unmute. Joe Sheehan, if you can just unmute and address the committee. Okay, Mr. Clerk, we'll go back then to the list.
Okay, very well. The next delegate is Bob Martin.
Bob Martin.
Hello.
Hi, you have your 5 minutes. Begin now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. As probably Eric Simpson and Mr. Crawford there, Councillor Crawford, if they knew Mr. Henderson, they probably heard the story 100 times. That I'm at 8 Hirschfield. We bought back in 2005. And we bought because we were told of a certain development that was going to be here and what was going to be as a nursing home in the lot that you're talking about. So it's a problem for all of us. Andrew Slater addressed a lot of it, and so have some of the other people that live in this development. Another thing is a couple of things that I have written down here is 2 Gidley, which is going to be right beside where the other north lot is going to be in the northwest corner there? And what about garbage? Where's the garbage unit going to be? Is it going to be a problem if with smell from into them? The other things I have is the actual, like Ian was saying previously, the architecture. We have no idea why this type of architecture would want to be put into a development of where it's something like when they built Chartwell beside us. They tried to keep it similar to what we have around here. Can't understand why they want to put in some new type of development here. I don't think it even suits the area, as Ian said and the other people have said. One thing that happened to us when Chartwell was being built is when they were digging the ground. I don't know when these people decide to dig it all for the underground parking, but on Hirschfield where we were, our houses were shaking. I have cracked walls. Drywall walls, corners that I've had to get fixed. Very shortly after that, I had to have 2 previous cracks that were from the builder originally fixed, and then another 2 brand new cracks that I had, and I'm pretty positive that is from the shaking of the buildings. And is there anybody going to be addressing that type of unit that they're building on the north lot, and when they're going to be digging? Because it was really a problem where we were. There was always pictures that were all crooked every single day, and it caused a lot of damage inside here that we had ended up having to fix ourselves. So that was the garbage, the architecture. How many stories? Why would you only allow Chartwell to do 4 stories? My mom is there next door, and then you're going to allow these people to do 6 stories. I don't quite understand it, like the other people are saying. And then it was the architecture. So those are the items that I have that I'm very concerned with, on top of everybody else's.
Thank you, Mr. Martin. Any other further questions or comments before? Okay. Would any members of the committee like to?
Could I just say something else then?
Yes, please.
I mean, if nobody's going to help us, I mean, the condominium had to pay for my foundation fixed, but I had to tear out 25 feet of drywall and pay for all the repairs and have somebody redo all of that. If this happens again for the shaking in the houses, who are we going to blame for this? I'd like to hear an answer on that, please.
Okay. Mr. Simpson, I don't know if you're able to answer that.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Barton, for your comments. Through the development and review process, we do require an assessment of construction vibration, which specifically looks at the things that you have noted. It defines an area of influence that could happen as a result of different digging and different tools that are used that will create vibration impacts to adjacent properties. So as a result of that, vibration has to be monitored on site during construction. And this is something that we would enforce and act accordingly on a complaint basis. As part of the kind of implementation of it, there's different things like pre-construction surveys that would take place at different adjacent property owners, like within the area of influence. So we do have that kind of measure in place to ensure no issues, and if the issue does arise, to try to mitigate it as soon as possible. You had one point there about waste. I just want to clarify that all waste will be stored inside the building. And there is a loading space proposed on the north side of it, which is where the waste would be picked up. So.
Thank you, Mr. Simpson. Mr. Clark, on to the next delegate, please.
Mr. Chair, we're going to try going back through the list of delegates who haven't had an opportunity to get technical issues sorted out. So the next delegate is Christine Dorward.
Christine Dorward, calling for the second time. If you're like to speak, if you could just unmute. Christine Dorward, if you just one last time, if you'd like to speak, if you could just unmute, please. Okay, we'll put you back in the queue for the very last time then, and I'll go to the next person on the list.
Mr. Chair, the next delegate is Maureen Dyke.
And Maureen Dyke, if you are there, if you could just unmute to address the committee. Maureen Dyke calling for a second time. I think we have Maureen Dyke. Maureen, can you hear us? Maureen, if you'd like to just go ahead and speak.
Yes, sir.
We can hear you. Go ahead.
I have a couple of questions. First of all, the staff have been, no one intended, have taken a trip to have a look at the properties in question. Also, to have a look at the surrounding area for the bill that fit in.
Maureen, sorry, I'm going to pause you right there. Maureen, can you hear me? We are not quite able to hear your questions. If you could repeat your question again.
Yes. In walking around doing petition, he has cover letter say we're in favor of a bill going there, but he's made for cities. It won't be seniors. My question is, if she not changed height in the building, she has reduced. My question is,
sorry, Maureen, I'm just going to pause again. Are any other members of the council getting this?
To her.
No, okay. Maureen, would it be possible for you to phone in to the meeting? Mr. Clark, do you have Maureen's email address by any chance?
Mr. Chair, I do.
Maureen, I'm going to have our clerk email you the phone number to call in. We might be able to hear you better that way. Would that be okay? Okay, Mr. Clerk, if you don't mind emailing Maureen. Maureen, just please keep an eye out for an email from our clerk. Mr. Clerk, if you don't mind just sending the dial-in information, we might be able to hear her better at that point.
Absolutely, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. We'll just pause a minute. Maureen, we're going to get you to call in. In the meantime, I'm going to go to the next speaker. You're still on our list. Please take your time, check out the email, follow the call instructions, and we'll let you speak, and hopefully we'll hear you better at that point.
Mr. Chair, the next delegate is Robert Patterson.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Mr. Patterson, are you available to speak? I think I saw you. Mr. Patterson, for a second time, if you could just unmute. That was Maureen. Mr. Robert Patterson, just one last time. Okay, Mr. Clerk, if I can go back to the next person on the list.
Hello, can you hear me now?
Oh, yes, we can. Mr. Patterson, yes, thank you. Can you hear us?
Yes, my name is Robert Patterson. I'm the president of the board of directors at Henderson Place. Most of my comments have been addressed as previously discussed with Andrew Slater, but just a couple of things I'd like to add to it, if I may. If I can address this comment to Mr. Simpson, it's my understanding that although it's inferred that the building was supposedly reduced to 6 stories, that the overall height of the building has not changed in any significant way. If Mr. Simpson can address that question for starters, I can add other questions, and there might well be the same source. So Mr. Simpson would be the person to relate these to also.
Mr. Patterson, I'm going to go ahead and get you to ask all your questions so as to maximize your time, if that's okay.
That's great. Now, the other one relates to the possibility of parking on Bantam. Council doesn't seem to appreciate that this is a 1 lane in each direction lane, at the end of which is a security gate for residents only. The visitors come in the southern gate down at Old Harwood, Hirschfield. So that's something. If you all of a sudden have parking on Bantam, you are now forcing people to drive illegally on the wrong side of the road. Has anybody given any thought to the safety implications therein? All right. I think that's probably why the clarification we wanted also was that is Bantham in your plans shown as a fire route? Okay, because again, if it's a fire route, your regulations specify very, very clearly that no parking is allowed on a fire route. So I'd like that aspect of things to be checked, if you would. That, I think, is probably the major things. As I said, Andrew Slater, related to the questions I had left, I'm out of the country right now, and Mr. Slater carried the ball for me. I appreciate that greatly. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Patterson. So back to Mr. Simpson. The three main questions were the building, the height being changed on the building, parking on Bantam and the idea of driving on the wrong side, and whether Bantam, is a fire route.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Patterson. So yeah, the height, it's 6 stories, but correct, the actual measurement to the tallest point of the building would be the same as it was before, because that's measured to the top of the rooftop mechanical penthouse, or the penthouse that includes the elevator and access to the 6-story common outdoor amenity space. But what changed was there was a full story on top of that, which is now no longer there because it's just 6 stories. The comment about parking, as I did allude to earlier in the presentation, the proposal is actually proposing a parking rate that is in exceedance or a surplus of what would be required if the minimum parking requirements were used. We don't anticipate that there would be a need for on-street parking on a lane. In addition, it is a private lane, so yes, it is a fire route. And it is subject to a condominium, which means if there were parking on it, it could be easily enforced to remove that parking. I believe that was everything.
Yes. Thank you. Mr. Clerk, I think we're at the beginning for the last time of the list.
Mr. Chair, we are calling on Delegate Joe Sheehan for the second time.
Yes, thank you. Joe Sheehan, if you are there, if you'd like to speak, please unmute.
Sorry,
calling on Joe.
Robert Patterson, can you still hear me?
We can, Mr. Patterson, but your unfortunately time was up. We are on to the next delegate now.
Okay.
Thank you. Joe Sheehan, are you there? Calling on Joe Sheehan for the second time to just unmute to address the committee. Okay, Mr. Clerk, going on to the next delegate then.
Okay, for the third time, Delegate Christine Dorward.
Okay, so it'll be the third and final time then. Christine Dorward, if you'd like to address the committee, please unmute or turn on your camera as you're comfortable and start your delegation. Christine Dorward going once, twice, and unfortunately, yeah, we cannot connect to her. Mr. Clerk, the next delegate, please.
Mr. Chair, for the third time, Delegate Joe Sheehan.
Joe Sheehan, one last time. Just if you are on the call, if you could unmute or turn on your camera to address the committee. Going once, twice. Okay, that did not work out. Did we get a call back from the constituent who we couldn't hear?
Mr. Chair, it does not appear that Maureen Dyke has joined the meeting by phone.
Maureen, you're still online. Are you able to call in? Maureen, if you could unmute your computer or call into the line, we just want to make sure you have a chance to address the committee regarding your concerns. Maureen, for the last time, I just want to make sure we're giving you an opportunity. If you can either unmute, just let us know you're trying to call. Okay, clerk, I think we'll have to because we can't hear Maureen and we don't have a call enough to move on then.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair. Can I use 2 minutes of some of the individuals that were unable to pose a question?
Unfortunately, Mr. Slater, sorry, who's speaking? Is Mr. Slater correct?
No, Mr. Ming.
Oh, Mr. Ming. Yeah, our bylaw there, you can't give time. Unfortunately, that's not how that works. Each individual delegate gets 5 minutes.
Yes, but I think 4 stories. I think we should stick with it. I don't see any reason
Mr.
why.
Ming, we hear you loud and clear, but unfortunately, you.
So I just want to make sure that you heard it. That's all.
We did. Thank you. Okay, so moving on to then concluding the public feedback component, I believe the applicant is available, Mr. Clark, correct?
That is correct.
So I'd like to invite them to come forward and say a few words regarding their application, if they would like.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Unfortunately, my camera has been turned off, so I can't put myself on. I was on earlier. My name is David Mackay. There we go. Yep. Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone. My name is David Mackay. I'm a registered professional planner with MHBC, and I represent the applicant. Also with me tonight is the owner's representative, the architect, and the arborist as well. Given the comments that were received, we thought we'd bring them along to answer any questions that committee may have. I'd like to first thank staff as well as councillors for working with our client over the last 2 years. I think we've come a long way and resolved a number of the concerns and comments that have been addressed through the process since the initial public meeting, open house. And we've come forward and are supportive of the staff recommendation. We worked very hard to address those comments, and we understand that a number of concerns have been raised. That's what happens when change does occur. But we are moving forward with an application which, as Mr. Simpson had noted, conforms to all of the relative policies, including the town's official plan. Relative to just some of the comments, in terms of as Mr. Simpson had noted, in terms of the zoning request, it is for a specific senior citizen apartment building. So we are restricted in terms of the type of use, and there is mechanisms under the Planning Act for enforcement should our client or a future owner break the rules in that regard, including substantial fines under the Planning Act. Relative to vibration and construction management, my client, as required by the town, has submitted a vibration report outlining methodology for that, which will be incorporated into a construction management plan for the property through construction to ensure that items and damage is monitored. It is identified up front in terms of pre-screening of affected areas within the influence area, and obviously any fixes or requirements to foundations and whatnot will be taken care of by my client as is required. Relative to the condo road, there's a couple of comments mentioned about parking, and obviously that is a driveway. Our access point is off of that driveway as per the agreement between the property owners, the condo and my client land, and that's registered on title with a shared facilities agreement, which includes snow plowing and whatnot. As well, we have an access point off of Old Harwood. So in terms of traffic and usage, that will be reduced because of that split component. And lastly, in terms of the tree matters, as Mr. Simpson had noted, we have provided substantial reporting on the adjacent trees. We believe that they will not be negatively impacted based on the recommendations of our certified arborists, and town staff are in agreement with that approach. And obviously, again, that will be monitored through the construction process. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions that the committee may have. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Do any members of the committee have any questions for the proponent? Seeing none, I just have one, and that's in regards to the thought process, because if I'm mistaken, I was reading the background and that ultimately there were affordable rental units as part of the original plan, but those were ultimately removed to focus only on the seniors only rental units. Is that correct?
That's correct. Initially, there was a senior a seniors component as well as affordable housing component. Obviously, the provider for the affordable housing is not here today with the project. So my client had to move on with their program with the seniors only component. Obviously, these are rental units that are primarily, I think, about 90% one-bedroom units. So geared towards seniors and geared towards that lifestyle. So that's their focus, and that's their business model, and that's what they're going to be proceeding with as per the zoning bylaw that we're requesting.
And it's obviously somewhat early, but do we have a price point to which we're starting at for a single bedroom senior?
I don't know. My client is on the phone, but I don't think, I'm just looking at my notes, I don't think they have anything confirmed at this point. Obviously a little bit early because we still have to get into the construction process and whatnot and nail down those costing and that sort of thing. So.
Well, I think I speak for the rest of council. Just, affordable housing is a key component in addressing this housing crisis, even for seniors. And I think Councillor Tyler Moran had addressed previously just, a lot of seniors moving, downsizing or whatnot and still needing a place to accommodate. So I just think we hope that, seniors are able to afford the residents that are being built. So any other questions from committee? Seeing none, we will move on. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
So moving the report to the table, I have a resolution moved by Councillor Khan, seconded by Councillor Bauer, that zoning amendment, sorry, I just want to make sure I have it. Zoning amendment application Z6/20 be approved, and that the implementing zoning bylaws provided in attachment 1 to this report be provided to council for its consideration at a future council meeting. And that was it. So any questions or comments from the committee? We'll start with Mayor Collier.
Thank you, Chair. Just a comment. And I made most of my closing remarks when I responded to Mr. Ming's questions on process. So I won't go back through that. I think I was pretty clear on the process and the rules we have to follow. I just wanted to speak quickly to some of the other comments. And these are pretty difficult decisions because one of the speakers, don't remember which it was, it might have been Mr. Ming, is right. I mean, we are elected and the residents elect us to make decisions on their behalf. And these are very difficult decisions when we're talking about infill developments. Home ownership is very personal, and having something brought into a neighborhood is, in my experience, never supported by the residents there. And we always hear the reasoning of property values and traffic and everything else. And that's why we have to listen to the experts, as I said before. I saw the original plans on this and I saw the revised, and I think there have been a lot of concessions made, and this is a big improvement. As I said, I would rather, when I started saying we were elected to make the decisions, if we don't make this decision today, then it gets transferred to the Ontario Land Tribunal, which is a group who are not elected and who are not from Ajax and do not know our community. And quite honestly, the plan that comes back when they approve it, because they will, could be very different than what we see today. And that's one thing that's very important, is when we do go through this process and we do get concessions from the developer, it's important that those that you've elected make that decision and not somebody else, because it could turn out much, much, much different and nobody would be happy. This council has made a very strong stance on economic development and also on creating other forms of housing, specifically affordable and seniors housing. We have a fixed urban boundary. We don't have a lot of developable land left. What we are seeing more and more is this type of infill developments in established neighborhoods. And it is very difficult to deal with that, with the existing neighbors and some of the things I pointed out. But I also know many people, a lot of my parents' friends actually, who have had to sell their houses and leave Ajax because we don't have seniors housing. We don't have alternate forms of housing other than generally low density single family residential homes. And we need that very badly. Seniors shouldn't have to leave Ajax because there's nowhere for them to live. So for those reasons, I will be supporting this. It does fit with our council direction that we all supported. It is not an easy decision. And I hope the residents understand I did listen very carefully to everything that was said. However, I do have to side in this case with the professionals because that's whose advice we pay to receive, and I can't argue with it because I don't know enough to argue with it. I have to trust our planners and engineers. So I will be supporting it. And Chair, I'd like to call for a recorded vote, please.
Okay, the recorded vote has been called and thank you very much. And Regional Councillor Crawford.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to understand from staff, Mr. Simpson, through you, Mr. Chair, is this the final open house for this development, or will there be a further open house for residents? I heard somebody say that they got caught off guard by the short time frame of this meeting. Is there going to be another public open house for people to speak?
Through you, Mr. Chair, to Regional Councillor Crawford. No, this is the last public meeting for this process. There was the public open house, which occurred in March 2021. And now this acts as the statutory public meeting under the Planning Act, as well as the recommendation meeting. So notice was given for this meeting 20 days in advance, which are the requirements of the Planning Act.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to clarify that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Tyler Moore.
Thank you, Chair. And the mayor kind of laid it out there, but I just want the residents to know, that we don't take these decisions lightly. I want you to hear that from me. I want you to know that we've been present throughout this process for the last 2 years. Mr. Patterson has been great dealing with him and just communicating and having conversations. And I don't want anyone to ever feel abandoned. We're always here, and we don't always get exactly what we're looking for. However, as Mayor Collier stated, when we heard that it was Regional Councillor Crawford stated as well, when we heard that it was going to be only seniors, I worry about the future of the seniors in the town of Ajax. We have those conversations all the time. Those are the group of people that we definitely don't want to abandon. And this just gives us more options. And as far as our presence in the process, we do live in a free market society and people buy a piece of land and we have to, let the process take place. But within that, we can negotiate, we can nudge, we can ask. And I think we've done that and tried to come up with something that's fair and something that's hopefully aesthetically, when it's all done, like a lot of the infill projects, it will look okay. The same way as Chartwell looks okay. Henderson Place is beautiful. And this will hopefully accommodate that as well. That's all I have to say, but I just don't want anybody to ever feel abandoned. We're always here, including some of the delegates tonight. If you have something more to say, you can always reach out. We'll come for a visit or we can have a phone conversation anytime. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Would any other members of committee like to speak? Seeing none, then I believe a recorded vote was called. Mr. Clerk.
Thank you. On the motion, in favor or opposed? Mayor Collier?
In favor.
Regional Councillor Crawford?
In favor.
Regional Councillor Dyes?
I think she has a conflict.
Oh, pardon me. Councillor Khan?
In favor.
Councillor Tyler Morin?
In favor.
Councillor Bauer?
In favor.
And Chair Lee?
In favor. I believe that passes unanimously. So, thank you to all the delegates. Moving on to last but not least is public meeting regarding PDS 2022-21, official plan amendment application OPA 21-A1, zoning bylaw amendment application Z2/21, draft plan of condominium application C-A-2021/02, firm land, parentheses, Cedar Incorporated, vacant lands, Cedar Street, 3-73 Cedar Street. I believe we have planner Sean Jeffrey to present.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair, members of council, and members of the public who are attending. So my name is Sean Jeffrey, and I am the planner responsible for processing the development proposal, which has been submitted by Humphreys Planning Group on behalf of Fernland Cedar. My presentation will provide a summary and evaluation of the development proposal and submitted development applications listed above. Please note that this meeting serves as a statutory public meeting for the committee to consider and make a decision on the proposed official plan, zoning bylaw, and draft plan of condominium applications. The continued review and approval of the site plan application will be completed by staff. Next slide. The subject lands are 1.76 hectares in area. A portion of the subject lands consist of an existing rental townhouse development with 36 units. The applicant has received draft approval to sever the lands into 2 parcels to facilitate the development of 20 back-to-back townhouse dwellings on the vacant portion of the site. The subject lands are located directly north of Highway 401, east of Knapton Avenue, and south of Cedar Street. The subject lands are surrounded by the following land uses. To the north are residential lands along Cedar Street with single detached dwellings. To the east is a church with a parking lot for Cedar Park. To the south is Highway 401, and to the west are residential lands consisting of single detached and 2-story street townhouse dwellings located along Knapton Avenue, Wright Crescent, and Reading Street. The subject lands also contain an area that has been identified by the MTO as potentially being required for a future Highway 401 widening. The subject lands are currently designated low-density residential within the Town of Ajax official plan. This designation permits single detached dwellings, semi-detached dwellings, duplex dwellings, and linked dwellings up to a maximum density of 30 units per net hectare. Townhouse dwellings may also be permitted, provided that such housing form is compatible with the scale and character of surrounding development. All dwelling units within the low-density residential designation shall generally not exceed a height of 3 stories. Oh, I forgot to say next slide. I'm sorry. You can go to that next slide. There's the official plan designation, and moving on to the next one, we're onto the zoning. So the subject lands are currently zoned residential multiple 6, RM6 in the Town of Ajax zoning bylaw. Permitted uses in the RM6 zone are multiple attached dwellings and maisonette dwellings with a maximum building height of 11 meters. So in May 2021, Humphreys Planning Group, on behalf of Firmland Cedar, submitted applications to permit the development of a common elements condominium with parcels of tied land on the subject lands. The residential condominium development consists of 20 back-to-back townhouses with a private condominium lane. The purpose of this report is to recommend approval of official plan amendment application OPA 21-A1, zoning bylaw amendment application Z2-21, and draft plan of condominium application CA 2021-02. Additionally, there are related site plan applications, which I will provide an overview of later in this presentation. So the official plan amendment application seeks to redesignate a vacant portion of the subject lands to the medium density residential designation, which permits a density of 30 to 75 units per net hectare. The medium density residential designation permits duplex dwellings, street townhouses, block townhouses, stacked townhouses, attached housing, walk-up apartments, and other forms of moderately scaled housing. All dwelling units within this designation shall generally be between 3 and 6 stories in height. As the proposed built form is not explicitly listed, back-to-back townhouses are being interpreted to be a form of attached housing or moderately scaled housing. The proposed net density of the development on the severed lands would exceed the maximum density permitted within the low density residential designation. The redesignation to medium density would increase density permissions and enable the development as proposed. The existing townhouse units on the retained lands would comply with the density permissions of the low density residential designation. As a result, this designation is proposed to be retained. Sorry, next slide. This will, you can move one slide forward. I'll remember next time. Okay, so this slide here just shows the orange area, which is proposed to be the medium density within the existing subject lands. Okay, next slide. The zoning bylaw amendment seeks to establish site-specific exceptions to permit back-to-back townhouse dwellings and establish various development standards on the severed lands. That's section 209, and it will address development standard deficiencies on the retained lands with the existing rental townhouse units. That's exception 210. So the zoning on the subject lands will remain RM6, but site-specific exceptions will be added to the severed and the retained lands. Permitted uses in the RM6 zone are multiple attached dwellings and maisonette dwellings. To permit the development proposal, the applicant is requesting that the zoning bylaw be amended to establish back-to-back townhouse units as a permitted use, along with exceptions to establish development standards that would implement the proposed development. The zoning bylaw amendment will also address zoning deficiencies on the retained parcel with the existing rental townhouses as a result of the proposed severance. This amendment would also address setbacks to the front and exterior lot lines, as well as establish a standard for accessory structures. Next slide. And then finally, the draft plan of condominium application will establish a common elements condominium tenureship with 20 parcels of tied land and establish the local private roadway. So within this draft plan of condominium, specific elements such as the private lane, visitor parking areas, and the meter room will be owned in common interest by the corporation, and the individual units will be freehold parcels of tied land, which are not a part of the condominium property. The draft plan of condominium will implement this ownership arrangement. Next slide. Just as a short overview of the ongoing site plan applications as well. Site plan application SP821 is the application associated with the condominium block, and the site plan amendment application SPA 2221 has been submitted to undertake site works to refurbish the existing rental townhouse development on the retained lands. The scope of this proposal includes paving the existing drive aisles and adding pedestrian connections to the parking area. Next slide. Great. As a general overview of the proposal, so the townhouse dwellings will be arranged in 2 rows with 10 units in each row. The individual parcels of tied land will have frontages of approximately 6 meters and setbacks of 4.7 meters to the dwelling. The north row of townhouse dwellings will front onto Cedar Street, while the south row of dwellings will front onto the private lane. The dwellings are proposed to be 3 stories with an approximate height of 11 meters. So each back-to-back townhouse dwelling will have direct vehicle access to the street or lane they front onto, with a driveway and a garage. Each unit will include 2 parking spaces, 1 in the driveway, 1 in the garage. In addition, 5 visitor parking spaces and 1 accessible space will be located along the private laneway to the south. In addition, there will be sidewalks added to Cedar Street and Knapton Avenue. Next slide. The applicant submitted a conceptual elevation rendering to provide an idea of what the proposed development would look like. A detailed review of the proposed elevation drawings is taking place through the site plan application and has been submitted. It's been subject to the review of the town's control architect as well. The following reports and studies were submitted as part of the development review process. They've all been reviewed and the recommendations are supported. Yep, thank you. Next slide. The proposed official plan amendment, zoning bylaw amendment, was reviewed against the applicable provincial, regional, and town land use planning policies. The specific planning policies are outlined and addressed in detail in the report. As per the report, the proposal is consistent with the policies of the PPS and conforms with the policies of the growth plan, regional official plan, and town official plan. Regarding the public consultation that occurred, applications were circulated to internal departments and external agencies, including the region of Durham. A public open house was held on October 26th, 2021. At this public open house, approximately 8 residents attended, along with Regional Councillor Dyes and Councillor Bauer. The main concerns that were raised at the open house were by residents on Cedar Street regarding parking and additional traffic that may occur. I can discuss this further if anyone has questions, but I'll kind of skip over that at this time. So planning and transportation staff do not have concerns with parking issues, given that it meets the development standards for parking requirements as outlined in the zoning bylaw. And Cedar Street has not been identified by transportation staff as requiring additional traffic calming measures at this time. Okay, going on to the recommendations. So based on what you've heard tonight and the report that you have read, the following recommendations are being provided for your consideration. That official plan amendment OPA 21-A1 be approved, and that official plan amendment number 70 be provided to council for its consideration at a future council meeting. That zoning bylaw amendment Z221 be approved, and that the implementing zoning bylaw be provided to council for its consideration at a future council meeting. That the Director of Planning Services or their designate be authorized to grant draft approval of the future draft plan of condominium application CA 2021-02 that will be required to facilitate the future development of a portion of the subject lands, and that staff bring forward a bylaw to re-register plan of subdivision 465 to council for its consideration at a future council meeting. Okay, next slide. That concludes my presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions that may have come up.
Thank you, Mr. Jeffrey. And might we say it's always a pleasure to have another Sean at the Town of Ajax. Just makes it very easy to keep the name straight. Are there any questions for Mr. Jeffrey from the committee? We have Regional Councilor Dyes.
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation. Looking at the site plan of the actual townhouses, there it shows that where the 401 is going to be widened to and the impact it'll have on that property. I guess my first question is, have we ever had an update as to when that might happen, the widening of the 401 in that area?
Through you, Mr. Chair, to Regional Councilor Dyes. At this time, it does not seem imminent with regards to this application. The MTO is not requesting to take the lands. So the area that's kind of identified on slide 10, it would be of the presentation. That is a buffer area. That's a 14-meter buffer area to the proposed widening. So the kind of the southern extent of the hashed line that's just below the visitor parking would be the extent of the potential widening. Okay. But from my perspective, I don't have an idea of the timeline, no.
So I would assume if they do go forward with this, there are standards as to noise walls and that type of issue, because it looks like it's hard to tell for me on a map like this, but it looks pretty close to residential. I'm just wondering if a sound wall is required. Does the town have any kind of say in what they would like to see when it's close to residential and with respect to height?
Through you, Mr. Chair, that might be a question. I see Jeff has his.
Yeah, I see Director Romanowski has his hand up. Did you want to address that?
Yes, through the chair to Regional Councilor Dyes with regards to the 401 and future widening. Nothing's been indicated right now. I know the Ministry of Transportation is starting their process and going through their environmental assessments to look at the widening of the 401. So to continue like the collector lanes further to the east. But right now they're just focused at the interchanges right now and doing those assessments. You may have noticed that there's some materials starting to be stockpiled underneath the Church Street Bridge at 401. That's in relation to some of those works that will be coming. And you know how MTO works. They stockpile their stuff years ahead of the actual work being done just because they have budget and they have to spend it within that timeline and then get their works out to the sites appropriately. But we can, definitely towards the end of the year, into the new year, provide council with an update on those goings on along the 401 corridor.
Well, that would be great. I'd appreciate that. I know we're really sort of in the hands of the government, the provincial government, to tell us when they're going to be ready. But we've been speaking about it for so many years now. It would be nice to know, particularly when there's developments such as this going in. My only other question would be the development, and then there were upgrades to the existing townhomes to the east. Will they be done at the same time?
The site plans are separate. The site plan application for this townhouse development and for the existing townhouse development are two different applications. So yes, it is, to my understanding, the intention of the applicant to undertake the works at the same time. Potentially the lands to the east, the existing townhouse development, would occur before this proposal does occur.
Well, thank you. That would be good news, I think, for the neighborhood to get everything done all at the same time and not have it staggered over months or a year apart. So thank you for the information.
Thank you. Any other members of the committee? Councilor Bauer.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mr. Jeffrey, for the presentation. My voice is acting up, so I will do my best. I just wanted to confirm, I know some of the concerns from the residents at the open house was about the increased traffic along Cedar and Napton area, and that currently there's no justification for traffic calming. But that's not to say that at a future time, if we did see the increase, we could certainly do traffic calming warrant at that time, correct? I just want to make sure.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That is correct. If residents do reach out, transportation staff definitely can add Cedar Street, Napton Avenue to a future list that would provide traffic calming measures if it so does require, yes.
Okay, great. And then just looking at the picture of the open land beside, in the area, beside the existing townhouses, says I have no, this is just a curiosity question. I'm guessing during winter with snow clearing, that could be a good spot right now to put a lot of extra snow. So do you think once the development is built, will there still be space for snow clearing?
Through you, Mr. Chair. So regarding the new development, there have been areas identified for snow storage. They are, so on the slide that's currently up, there are areas which we have set aside for snow storage, and within the condominium plan, we will be adding that should the extent of snow storage not be available, the snow will have to be hauled off-site, but it is, there is still quite a large extent of land to the south there, yes.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Thank you very much. That's it.
Thank you. Any other members of the committee? Okay, then I would now like to invite the not applicants. It's now open for public and invite comments from the public. Sorry, on the script here. I'll now go to the clerk to see if anybody anybody wishes to address us virtually. Mr. Clerk?
Mr. Chair, we did not have any delegates registered to speak to this item.
Oh, okay then. Moving on. Now I would like to invite the applicant, Humphreys Planning Group Incorporated, on behalf of Farmland Cedar Incorporated, to come forward if they wish to say a few words on their application.
Good evening. It's Rosemary Humphreys. Sorry, I'm having a problem with my video this evening. I apologize. I don't really have anything further to add. I think the overview presentation presented by Mr. Jeffrey was quite thorough in nature. I would just like to say, I guess I do have to add something because I just wanted to say something. We look forward to working with staff to finalize these applications so that we can get moving with them in terms of construction in the future. So thank you for that. And I'm happy to answer any questions if you have any of me. Thank you.
Thank you. I believe we do. Regional Councilor Crawford.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm not exactly sure this is for the applicant or not, but it seems to me this is a weird little split here, because I think Napton is part of Ward 1 and the other side is Ward 3, if I'm not mistaken, right? So Napton's kind of the dividing line between the two wards. So this little townhouse development is kind of snuggled right in there at the end of Napton, correct? I'm just looking at it on my Google map because I really cannot figure out the map that you have. I apologize. Is there currently a sound wall? I think there is a sound wall because that is very close to the 401. That whole area is just like literally on top of the 401. Is there currently a sound wall there? I have been up there. I have door knocked up there, and I can't for the life of me remember. There must be, right?
I'm happy to answer that.
Oh, okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah, it's Rosemary. Yes, in fact, there is a sound wall that goes along the edge of the 401 there today. We actually also did a noise report, so that was taken into account, the fact that there is a wall there. I'm not sure exactly when it was constructed, but it is quite a substantial wall. And I think there's no further noise mitigation required as it relates to increasing the wall height, as it relates to the proposed development. I think it's hard to see because it's probably overgrown with trees and shrubs and things. Yeah, it's very difficult to see, which in a way is a nice thing. So you're not looking at a huge barrier, but yes, there is one there today.
And the trees do offer the more buffering. So sorry, thank you. I thought there had to be there. I've never had any complaints about that. But anyway, I just wanted to make sure. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions from committee? So seeing none, mine is just very quickly timeline of when I guess construction will start, completion, etc.
I guess that's for me. Thank you. I guess we're at a stage where we're in the process of getting what I hope is our last site plan submission together to be submitted to the municipality for its review and final sign off. So assuming that's going to occur in the near future, I would expect that we could see construction starting on this site next year.
Okay. And when do you hope to be completed by then?
Well, this sort of a project probably would take a year, maybe not that long to complete, but I think we should allow for that amount of time.
Right. Because construction never finishes on time. So yes.
No, sometimes,
that buffer, right?
Especially these days. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Perfect. Thank you very much. So seeing no other questions from committee, then I have a resolution moved by Regional Councillor Crawford, seconded by Councillor Tyler Morin. I don't have to read this, guys, do I? We can say that all there. And I'll read number 4. Staff bring forward a bylaw to re-register a plan of subdivision 465 to council for its consideration at a future council meeting. Does anybody have any questions on the report, on the motion? Comments? Regional Councillor Dyes.
Just a comment, thank you. I know this was difficult for the houses that are across the street, which have been there a long time. It's part of the older Ajax community. So I know this is very difficult. And I have to say, though, we do have a real challenge in housing choices for people here in Ajax to live. Our children don't have a place to go. And we talked about the seniors as well. And this is one of the things we can have that are going to accommodate not only singles but families, something that's more affordable. And I've seen it. It's on the end of my street. We've just had a 16 townhouse complex built that's back to back, and change brings anxiety. And now that it's built and we have neighbors instead of questions, things are settling down. It's a very nice development and it's working very well. It's about half of the residents have moved in, I should say. So it's not always as bad as we think it is. Like I say, change creates anxiety. It is something very different for Ajax. But again, we have to be able to, with the population growth, we have to be able to put people somewhere. And we're not all making a ton of money. We come with different incomes, and that's very important for everybody. So for those reasons, I think this is a good location, which is very close to a park, and it's a great location for families to be. And I'm hoping that they will become part of your neighbors and part of your neighborhood in the future. And so I do support this development. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other members of committee like to speak on this? Seeing none, then we'll call to vote. All in favor? Opposed? And that passes. Moving on to item number 5, we have no presentations or reports, which brings us to item 6, adjournment. Moved by Councillor Khan, seconded by Mayor Collier, that the September 6, 2022 meeting of the Community Affairs and Planning Committee be adjourned. Any questions, comments? All in favor? You've been a great audience. Good luck,
Excellent job, Chair. Excellent job.
Good job. Thank you.
Have a good night, everyone. Ciao.